Back then, a lot of people don't know this. In the US, coffee was just, it was a commodity. It was $1. You get it at a gas station. You get it at there were no coffee shops. There was no Starbucks or, any baristas or anything like that. You got your cheap coffee for $1 at either a gas station, at a restaurant, and, whatever. He was on vacation in Italy, and he was totally fascinated by the coffee culture in Italy. And it was in between home and in between work, and how the Italians would actually stop by, sit down, drink their coffee, and then they would go on. It's almost like a sacred thing that they did every single day. And so he basically saw that, and he took that same idea and he applied that in the US. And obviously we all know what happened to the Starbucks now.
Hello and welcome to the Riyadi Club podcast, where entrepreneurs are the real heroes. On this podcast, we discuss tools, concepts, and ideas that are practical and inspirational for the entrepreneur. To learn more, go to www.riyadi.me. That's RIADI.me. Thank you, and I hope you find this episode helpful.
Hello entrepreneurs, this is Ruba Al-Tijani and welcome to Riyadi Club without Qaqish. Today we're going to talk about community and ask you if you are already part of a thriving community. So Dawood, welcome, and tell us, why is this important for the entrepreneur that is listening to us?
Sure. Well, hello, Ruba, and hello, entrepreneurs. As an entrepreneur, I want to ask you a question. As an entrepreneur, are you part of a thriving community of other entrepreneurs? Better yet, are you part of a thriving community of other entrepreneurs in your specific industry? So, for example, if you have a dental practice, are you part of a thriving community that includes other dental practices? And I'm not talking about being part of an association or attending an annual industry conference or something like that. I'm also not talking about silly networking groups, which I hate, because you walk into a room and you feel like you're in a room full of salespeople just trying to sell you stuff disguised as networking. And so, are you part of these groups or not? And again, a thriving community of other entrepreneurs that are in your specific industry. And here's the big problem that I see. There are so many networking groups, there are so many communities, there are so many mastermind groups out there that are a total waste of time. And believe me, Ruba, I don't know if you've been part of these or not, but I have throughout my entrepreneurial career. And I would just rather watch paint dry rather than be part of a group that is not doing anything for me. And what I mean by that is, and I don't know if you get these emails or phone calls. I get them like every 1 to 2 weeks.
All the time.
Oh, you do? Time. Okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. But there are so many of them. I don't know which one to pick. It's difficult.
Well, this is how I get it. And they make me feel good about myself. But then after the third time, I'm like, okay, there's nothing special here. I get the email, oh, wow, you look like you're a successful entrepreneur. Congratulations on your success. We have this exclusive community. We would like you to be part of it. So you get the first one, you're like, wow, hey, that looks good. And then the second one, the third one, and the 10th one. By the 10th one, you realize, oh my goodness, they're just doing the same thing over and over again. And so here's why this is important for you as an entrepreneur. Setting aside these silly networking groups and communities and masterminds. If you're able to get involved in the right community, it is one of the easiest and least expensive way for you to massively improve your business and your life. And I'm gonna talk from experience. I'm gonna share a couple of things that a community like this could do for you and for your business. Number one, you can bypass expensive consultants. You don't need to hire expensive consultants to fix and fine-tune things in your business. Another thing that you can get with a really great community is you can speed up your learning because you don't have to figure everything out by yourself. The other thing that you do is you buy back time. You don't have to spend all this time learning these things. Probably the thing for me is I was able to grow my business, and more importantly, I was able to have better profits in my business. And so another thing is you've got a lot of camaraderie with these other entrepreneurs that understand your business at an intimate level. And what I mean by that is sometimes as an entrepreneur, it's hard to go and talk to your employees. It's something that's really difficult or challenging. Or even, you go home and you may talk to your spouse, right? So I'll talk to my wife. She's very supportive. But there are things that it's just like only somebody else in this industry would get that. And so for me, it's been phenomenal. And so here's what I want to do on today's session. Number one is I want to share a story of how I was lucky. I'll be honest, I was lucky, but I was totally blown away by being part of an incredible, thriving community. And I'm going to share that a little bit. Number two is I'm going to talk about franchises and how a franchise relates to the success of your business and how it relates to you being part of a community. And then the third thing I want to talk about is the communities that I am part of. What do they look like? How often we meet and things of that sort. Because I found a rhythm that works really well for me, and I think it'll work well for you. And so my hope is after listening to this, you're going to walk away and understand the importance of the right community for you as an entrepreneur. And I want you to not waste time or money and join the wrong one. I want to share with you what you could do that could, where you invest your time, you invest your money, and it could be totally transformational for your business. And Ruba, we can go ahead and get started. I guess before I share my story and dive in, I want to come back to you, and then I'll share my story.
I absolutely want you to dive in because I am not a part of a community. And like we've been talking about the podcast, before the podcast, David, it is so difficult to figure out everything on my own. This session is definitely for me, and it's for people like me who are, I get the invitations, I get a lot of emails, but the problem is there are a lot of communities, and I think I need something a little bit specific. A virtual community is a good idea, but maybe for the first time I want to meet them and get the sense of a community rather than starting something virtual. But I absolutely love the internet and I absolutely respect virtual stuff. So I can't wait for you to dive in.
All right, sounds good. So before I talk about my story, I must say I started a business. It was successful. I had like anybody else, I had a lot of challenges and successes and failures and all that fun stuff. But one of the things is people were trying to tell me, hey, join this group, join this community, join this, join that. And I'm like, all right, I don't know what I'm missing. Let me go in and, let me join this and join that. And I can tell you so many of these groups or communities or networking groups drove me crazy because it was like, it was just jockeying for positioning. It seemed like, oh yeah, I want to impress others, or, it was people that weren't in my industry and they didn't understand what was going on. And I was there to impress other people with, I don't know, clothes or whatever. And it just drove me crazy because I'm like, look, I've got a business. It's a great business. I love what I'm doing. How do I grow it? How do I, have it more profitable? How do we have a healthier business? And there were so many of these so-called networking groups where somebody's in a different industry and you get together, but you can only have one lawyer or one dentist or this or that. And whatever, you go to one meeting, two meetings, and then, I'd just rather, like I said, I'd rather watch paint dry than attend these meetings because it wasn't for me. And it wasn't really helping me and helping my business. Like, it was nice to go and meet other people, but, I didn't need more friends. I didn't need, more family. I had enough. But what I needed was a community that would help me in my business, right? That really understood my business and would allow me to do that. And so I'm going to share my story. And this is where I was blown away because I had been part of so many bad ones that when I found the good one, I was just totally blown away. So one of my first meetings, I walked in and it was a 1.5 days, right? So like one full day and then a half a day. And it was with 8 other entrepreneurs and a professional facilitator. And there was a facilitator that facilitates the group. And then it was a total of 8 of us as entrepreneurs. And we were all in the same vertical or in the same industry, but we worked in different cities. So we did not compete with each other. Now, it probably helped that it was in Napa Valley in California, beautiful wine country. But I was sitting in that meeting and I was just completely blown away. And I remember halfway through that meeting, I was sitting in there and I was telling myself, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I can't believe we get to do this. I can't believe I didn't do this sooner. It felt like I was cheating on the test, but it was perfectly legal. Like I wasn't cheating. Like, I was cheating, but I wasn't. It was like somebody gave me all the answers and I'm like, oh my goodness, what's wrong with me? Why did I not do that earlier? And I think what really got me was I had been part of these generic get to know each other networking groups. And when I got into one that was amazing, I was totally blown away. So let me just maybe describe that a little bit for the listeners so that they understand what that is. And again, there's different types of communities, there's different groups and things like that. But this for us, it was 8 entrepreneurs. We meet for a day and a half. Before the meeting, we submit our report, like on our company financials and number of employees and stories and things like that. And again, we don't compete with each other. We're in the same business, but we're all in different cities. And basically what happens is, you fly into that city the night before, you have meetings that whole day, and then the next day you have a half a day of meetings. And then some people, spend the weekend there, and some people just, fly back. So in reality, the total time is 2 days if you want that to be that, or you can extend it in the weekend if you want to spend more time there. But during the meeting, I walked away. I mean, I'm sitting there and I don't write, I type. And so I'm typing and I'm like, oh my goodness. I walked away with so many actionable items that I could do with my business. It wasn't another idea. It wasn't another theory. It wasn't some academic theory about something. It was things that I could go and I can do in my business. And I was completely blown away. And here's the deal. Some things that I had not figured out in my business, and they were complicated, like these were not simple things. People gave me an answer and how to approach it, and I was just thrilled. I'm taking notes, I'm writing it down. I'm like, yeah, these are the action items when I get back. Now, the opposite of that is true, where I had figured something out and they were completely fascinated. How did you do that? And I'm like, piece of cake. And then I started sharing all the details on how we did that. And again, there's no competition. It was easy. I'm going to give you an example of one actionable item I walked away with. Sometimes you buy supplies with a vendor, right? Hardware, software, whatever, depending on the industry that you're in. And then we were having some challenges with that supplier. And then somebody in my group said, hey, take a look at this other supplier. They provide better support. They have a better process. And oh, by the way, you also save 3%. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Oh my goodness. Why did I not know that? Right. And it's just, hey, I am sitting in a meeting with these guys and I'm learning this stuff. Right. The other thing that was really fascinating was to be able to kind of compare metrics or best practices, or like, I don't feel on an island on my own. Hey, somebody else is in this business. How much profit are they making as a percentage, right? How much money are they spending on marketing or sales or administrative and finance? What percentage of their service or operations is being spent, or what's their gross profit, right? So there's usually some industry metrics that you can look at and you can say, hey, how am I doing compared to the group? And then when you find somebody that's doing really well, you're like, hey, how are you guys doing that, right? Again, we're not competing.
So they're open to share information and share real insights.
Exactly. And so for me, it was totally transformational. And as I said, I accidentally stumbled upon this. And I couldn't believe that this doesn't exist in other industries. And I honestly, I got really annoyed at the generic networking groups because those drive me crazy. They don't really benefit you at all. So, Ruba, I'm going to come back to you here in a minute, but 2 things that I want to share. There's 2 quotes that I want to share with the listener to get this point across. There's a great quote by Dan Sullivan. He says, you can survive without a community, but you can't thrive without one. And here's the deal. It might take you a little bit of time to find the right community, but man, it really, really, really makes a difference when you do that. And here's the deal. I was surviving. I was doing well. But once I found that community where I belonged, where I was able to get what I needed and what I wanted in my business, I was able to really, really thrive. And then there's another quote. It's an African proverb that I love. It says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yeah.
And the whole idea is if you want to go far or if you want to go deep, you want to go together as a team. And so those are kind of 2 final thoughts. But Ruba, you can probably sense my excitement from the story because I remember the days. I'm like, I'm telling you, I'm sitting there. I'm like, wow, how did I not know about this earlier? Because it made such a big difference. It had such a big impact on me and on my business.
And so how can someone find the right community? What are the criteria or the indications that this is the right community for you? Is there anything like that, or you just need to try it and and figure it out?
Yeah, there is. And that's kind of like, I'm going to save that to bullet point number 3, because I want to talk about something else before I talk about that. But there is, and part of it is trial and error, right? Sometimes you just kind of go in, you're like, hey, maybe this is for me. And then you realize that it's not. The key is, if it's not, to kind of end on good terms and end it quickly, rather than saying, okay, let me see if I can work it out and things like that. But I'm going to talk about the communities that I'm part of and sort of the meeting rhythm and sort of how I came across that. I'm saving that to point number 3. I want to talk a little bit about the franchise model and the independent business, because again, it might seem strange that I'm talking about franchises, but I want to get a point across. But before I do that, Oba, any questions or comments?
No, I'm good.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I want to answer your question, but I have an order that I want to follow. So you do a good job of kind of throwing me out of whack, so. So the second point that I want to talk about is, I want to talk about a franchise versus an independent business. And again, it might seem strange that I'm talking about a franchise when it comes to being part of the community, but there's a logic to that, and I'm going to get to this in a second. Here's the deal. Most people are familiar with the difference between a franchise and an independent business. If you're not, Google it and find out. But with a franchise, I guess before I talk about how a franchise works, what I want to do is I want to share some statistics with you as a listener, because these are really, really important. So your chances of succeeding as a franchise are much, much, much better than if you are an independent business. And here are the statistics. After 5 years, the success rate for a franchise is around 80%. After 5 years, the success rate of an independent business is around 20%. I'm going to put this a little bit differently to get the point across. If you have 10 franchises that started today, and you have 10 independent businesses that started today, after 5 years, 8 franchises will remain open. And after 5 years, only 2 independent businesses will remain open. And so this is a huge deal, because as an independent business, the odds are stacked against you. They're more stacked in the favor of a franchise. So the question becomes, what are these franchises doing that you can help and succeed as an independent business? Now, before I talk about that, I want to say some of the things that you give up as a franchise. Like if you go the franchise route, here's a couple of things that you give up. And again, it's right for the right kind of person. But if you're listening to this session, it's probably not for you. One of the things that you give up as a franchise is your independence and freedom. And this is a really big deal for you as an entrepreneur. You did not become an entrepreneur to become a hostage and give up your independence and your freedom. You really have to follow. And again, I'll use the classic McDonald's example, right? McDonald's has a template for everything. You need to follow that, and you follow that, and your chances of success are great. And that's great for the right person. But if you really became an entrepreneur, you don't want to give up your independence and your freedom. The other thing that you give up is royalties. And here, for me, I don't think people think about that a lot, but I think it's a really big challenge. So according to the SBA, the franchise royalties are anywhere from 4 to 12%. So if I just take the average and I say it's 8%, you're basically paying 8% of your revenue for the lifetime of your business. Here's the deal. If your business has 10% in profit, so after you pay yourself and your business has 10% in profit, that's considered a good, profitable business. If for most industries, almost all industries, if you're best in class, if you're in the top 20%, if you're in that elite, you're making a 20% profit, right? Again, after you pay yourself. And that's considered great. That's best in class. 80% of the businesses never hit that much profit. But let's just say you're part of that elite group and you're making 20%. You're basically giving up almost half of your profits in royalties to that franchisor. Again, nothing wrong with it as long as you know that that's what you're going into. I would say I became an entrepreneur so I can have freedom, so I can have independence. And I think freedom is probably one of my highest values as an entrepreneur. And I think it is for most other entrepreneurs. And in a way, if you go the franchise route, you lose that. Again, they have a role to play, but I don't think it's for you as a listener. You probably aren't listening to this if that's what you were thinking about. Now, this is a long way for me to say a great community provides the best of both worlds. I like to call it that next generation franchise. And what I mean by that is you don't give up your independence, you don't give up your freedom, and you don't pay royalties for the lifetime of that business. You might pay membership fees, you might pay like a subscription fee or something like that, or an annual fee, but you're not locked in. With royalties, you're locked in forever. So a great and thriving community provides you with ways to grow your business, to succeed, to increase your profits, best-in-class metrics for profitability, service operations, and things like that. And so that community is really the best of both worlds. A great, thriving community could essentially act as a franchisor without you giving up your independence and freedom, without you giving up royalties. And the second you're not happy with that community, or it doesn't make sense, or it's the wrong community, you're not stuck paying royalties for the lifetime of your business. And so I kind of talk a little bit about the franchise model, because if you're able to take that same model and apply it in a community model, it's amazing what the success might be. And a way to think about this is you've got, again, I'm going to pick on dentists as an example, because that's an easy one for everybody to relate to. If you've got dental practices, there's some best-in-class metrics or key performance indicators where you can compare, regardless of what city you're in or even what country you're in. Hey, how much are we spending on profits? How much are we spending on supplies? How much are we spending on payroll? What are our profit margins and things like that? And you could share that, right? If you've come up with a marketing that works really well and you're in one city, why not share that with somebody else in another city? You're not competing with each other, right? And it's a different mindset. And so it's very rare that you get into these kind of communities where they're really opening and sharing all this. What you have is an association. What you have is an annual conference. And a lot of times these conferences will talk about the technical aspect of the work, how you become a better dentist and, change a tooth or, and I know nothing about that, but I know about the business of dentistry, right? Those are, two different things. And so a great community like that, if you think of it as a franchise model, right, it potentially, hey, how can they help me so that I have a better business, and vice versa, how can I help other members in my group? That really, really, really goes a long way. So one of the things, Ruba, that I look for is a community where I can have other entrepreneurs that are in a business that's exactly his mind, but maybe in a different city or in a different country, or in the same vertical. So that's one of the things that I'll look for. And I'll answer that question in more detail, but I want to come back to you. Does that make sense why I talked a little bit about the franchise model and how it relates to the independent business?
Yeah. And I loved how you put it together, because it's interesting, because the main difference between a franchise and independent business is that they give you the business model, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Here is the business model. Like, here is what you need to do. Here are the templates. This is what your service should look like. This is what your marketing should look like. These are the standards. Take it, full package, go and just implement it. So you don't really have to figure anything out, so you don't spend so much time, but it comes with penalties, right? Because they often give you conditions and you have like a quota to sell, and you're just really limited. Yeah, so I really love that you brought it through this way, like comparing a franchise to a community and how the community really gives you the benefit of both worlds. Yeah, and it's just amazing, because I've been thinking, okay, so a community, this for me is something like taking a course, but it's more dynamic even, because you're meeting with real people and you get to like in the course the information is specific, right? So it's rigid, it's just specific, it's not tailored for you. You don't get it through a conversation. You're watching a video, you're reading documentation, but this is real people interacting, and sometimes there is really, and most of the times there is a power in the group. Okay, so I'm looking forward to point number
All
3,
right, sounds
David.
good. Thanks, Ruba. What I want to share about here in point number 3 is, here are the communities that I'm part of, and I'm going to share sort of the meeting rhythm or the meeting cadence, how often I meet and things like that. This is what I found that works great for me, and I want to share that with you as a listener. Again, I didn't arrive here on day one. Some of it took me through some trial and error, and then I became smarter, and I look for specific things. And I'm in a really great place, and this is sort of my meeting rhythm and my meeting sequence. I would say that I'm part of, 3 groups or 3 communities, whatever you want to call that. And let me explain. The first group or the first community, it's a strategic community with entrepreneurs in other industries. So once a quarter, one full day, I go and I meet and I'm with other entrepreneurs in other industries, and there's some coaching. And one of the things that I really like about that is it really has to do with the mindset of an entrepreneur. And honestly, it's just good to sort of get away from your business and work, instead of working in your business, work on your business every 3 months or so. So I like to physically get away, think strategically about my business. Even just getting away without even going to this group sometimes helps, right? But obviously, I like to go and learn. And then what I really like about that is there are things that I can learn from other entrepreneurs in other industries, right? Sometimes some great ideas that you get are things from other entrepreneurs doing in another industry that you can apply in your industry.
Yeah, it's like thinking in a different box, not outside the box, but totally in a different box.
And here's an example of this, just a simple example. Starbucks, what was his name? Howard Schultz, was that his name? The founder? Anyways, the founder of Starbucks. Yeah. He was in the United States and, he was on vacation. And, back then, a lot of people don't know this. In the US, coffee was just, it was a commodity. It was $1. You get it at a gas station. You get it at there were no coffee shops. There was no Starbucks or, any baristas or anything like that. You got your cheap coffee for $1 at either a gas station, at a restaurant, and, whatever. He was on vacation in Italy and he was totally fascinated by the coffee culture in Italy. And it was in between home and in between work, and how the Italians would actually stop by, sit down, drink their coffee, and then they would go on. It's almost like a sacred thing that they did every single day. And so he basically saw that, and he took that same idea and he applied that in the US. And obviously we all know what happened to the Starbucks now.
It's about the experiences, not about the coffee, And it also reminds me of our favorite story, the Wright Brothers, right?
Yeah.
The Wright Brothers, they're totally from outside the industry, right?
Yeah. So with the Wright brothers, what was interesting is they came up, with the first in flight in the early 1900s, but they basically owned bicycles. And Samuel Langley, who was, he was a professor at a university, he was funded by the government. He was thinking of an airplane, more as a ship. And these guys, with less than, I think, $500, right? And, Samuel Langley had what was equivalent of $1 million today to invest and test and do things like that. These Wright brothers, they approached it like it was a bicycle. Instead of thinking it as a 2-dimensional thing, they figured out that, hey, it's a 3-dimensional thing. And, obviously there's a little bit more to that, but they took something from another industry, which is riding bicycles, to airplanes. So yes, you're right. So that's one community that I'm part of. And I like to think of that as a strategic community with entrepreneurs in other industries. And I attend there once a quarter, so once every 90 days for a full day. And I walk away with strategic things that I can implement in my business or in my life. So that deals with things at what I would say at the strategic level. Now, at the tactical and at the operational level, the second kind of community is a community where I meet with entrepreneurs in the same industry, and ideally they're doing something even in the same business, but in different cities or different states or different countries, right? Where we're not competing with each other. Because if I met with an entrepreneur that's doing what I'm doing in my same city, there might be some things that maybe I'm not comfortable sharing or, whatever the case might be. And so that second kind of community is phenomenal. And again, I'm going to use the dentist as an example. Imagine that you have a dental practice, right? And you meet with other dentists, not that are employees of a healthcare organization or anything like that, but other dentists that have their own independent practices, that have their own dental practices. Here, I'll just give you an example. Imagine how cool it is if you're you run a dental practice and you've got somebody from, Amman, Beirut, Muscat, Abu Dhabi, Cairo, getting together and actually really sharing at a deep level some of the things that are going on in their business. And I'm not talking about like superficial stuff or something that you can Google search or anything like that, but something that's like, man, it's a real problem. It's a real challenge. It's a burning question. I don't know how to solve that. I love these kind of groups because this kind of community gives me tactical and operational things that I can go and I can implement in my business that is very, very actionable. Like I can go and I can put something in place the next day and it's going to work and it's going to work really well. And so if I have a business that's in Amman and, there's another dentist that's in Abu Dhabi, we're never going to compete with each other. We've got a different clientele. Why would I not want to share everything with him or her?
You might actually cooperate.
Exactly.
Cooperate, right? Because you could be like, okay, if I'm sending you clients to Amman from Abu Dhabi, then maybe give them a discount or whatever. I mean, refer them to a different dentist. I don't know.
Yeah, but those type of businesses, they tend to be very local, right? Like if I want to see, unless it's like a major surgery or something, but if I'm getting a filling or this or that, you're generally looking at a dentist that's, I don't know, within the city of where you live or within the region that you live. So the whole point behind that is, listen, you can actually have a group of a community like that of people that are in the same vertical that do that. Now, this group, what I like to do with this group is I meet once a month and we have this tool that we say thorns, roses, and buds, and then we ask a question. So what's something that's a pain in the butt in your business, right? What's something that's going really well? And then what's something that has a lot of potential, kind of like if you think of a rose, right? There's the flower, there's the bud, and then there's the thorn. So we kind of talk about what's going really well in the business, what isn't, what has a lot of potential, and then what question do you have for the rest of the group? And then you'll ask that question, and then the rest of the group gives you feedback, right? They're doing something very, very, very similar. So that's the second kind of community that I'm part of. What I like to do there is, once a month it's virtual, and then once or twice a year get together in person. It just helps, build those relationships and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. I could relate to that a little bit. Remember the Mindvalley University? There were 4 people, and we had to share like what's a problem that you have with your business, and then what do you need advice. There were like I think 3 questions quite similar to that, and even though it was virtual with people that you didn't know, I was surprised of how excited I was and how much I loved it. I didn't get so much insight because they were not people from my industry. They were from different industries. But it was amazing to connect with stranger on this level.
Yeah. Again, let me just kind of recap. Group 1 or community 1 is strategic community with entrepreneurs in other industries. Group number 2 or community number 2 is a community of other entrepreneurs that do what I do, but in different cities or different countries. And then the third group, and I call it a community or a group, is just a one-on-one monthly call with an entrepreneur that is in a different city or that is in a different country. I like to call him my entrepreneurial buddy. And so here, what I do is for an hour virtually once a month, and you can call it like a virtual breakfast or a virtual cup of coffee or, whatever you want to call that. I meet with somebody that is in the same business that I am in. He's got roughly about the same number of employees and the same revenue. And we're able to really talk whatever's on our mind and just compare notes. And what generally happens in this 1 hour of us talking once a month is, of course, we talk business, but you get to know their families and, it becomes a much deeper relationship. And also what happens is throughout the month, you can easily send him or her an email and say, hey, what did you do here? What did you do there? Or, whatever. And it could be as simple as what like software or CRM are you using that you're having so much success with? Or, how are you could talk about 100 different things. And again, it allows you to go really deep and say, hey, this is how I would do that. Or you could even collaborate on projects together when it's one-on-one. It's a lot easier to do it that way. Say, hey, we're running this campaign. Are you running it? Okay, well, let's compare notes and see what's working and, what's not. So now, you're leveraging the power of communities, right? And there's just a lot more intelligence with that because it's not just you, right? So now I'm part of 3 groups or 3 communities, and I'd like to think I'm a pretty smart guy, but I'm so much smarter now because I'm able to tap into a lot of other brains and have that. And so you can call that, might call that like, the new AI or, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that because you're having support, so you're not exactly doing it alone. Remember, we've been talking about being an entrepreneur sometimes comes with a lot of loneliness. So you're overcoming this loneliness, you're accessing more intelligence, and experiences. So on the strategic level, and then on the tactical level with other entrepreneurs from the same industry, but they could be from different sizes, right? So you could be a small entrepreneur and then, or let's say a small business, bigger business, much bigger business, but within the same vertical industry. And then you even dig deeper and drive it deeper so that you're with someone almost from the same size and the same industry. So it's more personal. Okay, that is great. That is great. That's the whole ecosystem, David.
So I'm sharing what works well for me. And at some point in my entrepreneurial life, I could honestly say I felt alone but not lonely. And what I mean by that is, of course, I was surrounded by people at work. Of course, I was surrounded by family and friends, right? There was no lack of any of that right there. But then I would have like this deep challenge at work.
You need to figure it out and you need to make the decision and what works, what doesn't work. It's kind of like having a friend who tells you, hey, I've been through this and that's how I did it, and then it's up to you how to do it. Yeah,
it's more meaningful, right? Like if you have a huge success, of course you go home and I'll tell my wife and she's happy for me and this and that, but she doesn't understand the extent of that success or that challenge. Whereas if I talk to somebody in my industry, it's like, oh my goodness, how did you do that? That's amazing, And now all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, here's what I did. And he or she wants to know the details, right? Because I play sports, I think the best analogy is like, man, I've got like these guys that are on my basketball team now, or soccer, and I can really celebrate that. And it's just so much fun. And we won together. Even though he runs a different business, okay, we can celebrate together because I won or he won or whatever the case might be, but we're not competing. So anyways, those are the communities that I'm part of. That's kind of like the rhythm, the meeting rhythm that works well for me. And very important, I don't get so sucked into it that I forget about my primary business, right? Because some people are like, they're just too busy attending,
community meetings, and then it's like weekly.
Yeah.
And that's
exactly
what I liked as well. Yeah. So you are right. Part of it is finding your right fit, kind of what works for someone might not work for someone else, but I would definitely see the advantage in it.
Yeah, I want to conclude and then have you sign off, but I've got a couple of questions for the listener. So I'll go back to the two questions as a listener that I asked you in the beginning. As an entrepreneur, are you part of a thriving community of other entrepreneurs? Better yet, are you part of a thriving community of other entrepreneurs in your industry or in your vertical? Or are you just wasting a bunch of time in different groups and different networking groups that do very little for you and do very little for your business? If you are part of a thriving community of other entrepreneurs, great. Congratulate yourself. And I'm serious when I say that. You're part of a small group that's figured out these shortcuts for your entrepreneurial life. If you are not part of a thriving community of other entrepreneurs in your industry, my hope is that this session helped you better understand how impactful a community like this could have on you personally and professionally. What I would encourage you to do is ditch these silly networking groups and find a thriving community that can actually help you personally and professionally. So go for it. You have very little to lose and you have a lot to gain. And it's okay. You may not find that the first time or the second time, but give it a shot and see what it is. Go out there, find and join a thriving community, and you'll transform your business and your life.
That's great, David. Thank you for sharing that. And as you're saying, ditch the silly networking groups and find the thriving community. I remember my experience. You remember when I told you I joined a virtual community and I just felt like they're totally not my people. I mean, they were super nice and I just felt like this is not how I like to do it. This is not what I needed.
Yep.
So yeah, absolutely could relate to that. So with that, thank you for listening to this program of Riyadi Club, where entrepreneurs are the real heroes. And don't forget, you have something in this world, so rise up.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Riyadi Club podcast. And remember, you have something in this world, so rise up. If you want us to cover a specific topic, or if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, go to www.riyadi.me. That's RIADI.me. Thank you and have a great day.